Whilst everybody in the UK is looking forward to the 12th of April this year, we are now hearing that this freedom will come at an expense: the Covid-19 vaccine passport. The government in the UK has been talking about it, and so far the government has said there will be no legal requirements for a COVID passport, but it is starting to worry people. What if the government imposes such a requirement, or different places such as pubs, gyms or even hairdressers start imposing a passport? Where does that leave us? This is Kareesha Turner, your human rights barrister, bringing you updates on Kareesha law. We don't only talk about immigration, but we also talk about civil liberties and human rights issues. So subscribe and click on the notification button for regular updates. The idea of a COVID passport will create a two-tier Britain. This does not only concern migrants, but also citizens and those who are lawfully settled here. It concerns all of us. Whilst the government has announced that it will not impose a COVID passport, the government said it will be legal for such businesses to ask customers for proof of COVID status if they wish to do so. Now, this causes a series of problems. Let us start with migrants and the undocumented. They are still scared of going to their GPs to get vaccinated. I did a video on that quite recently. So even if this passport is not imposed by the government, migrants who are scared to be vaccinated will be left out. And it is not an irrational fear. The NHS and different governmental bodies share data, and migrants are worried that this information somehow might be passed on to the Home Office. And rightly so. Most of the schemes that have been proposed so far by private organisations, such as the World Economic Forum, are talking about mobile phone apps. And this could involve a different approach, such as verifying someone's identity, facial recognition, to integration with NHS medical records. Which brings us to our bigger problem. How will these checks take place for citizens and those who have been vaccinated or have a passport? Will the government create a checkpoint, say at tube stations or railway stations? What about attending an event or going to watch a football match? So we will effectively become a checkpoint society, and this is a recipe for discrimination. Now, as a barrister, I understand this touch upon legal and ethical issues. There is something to be said about the curtailment of our freedom when our behaviour harms others, and the government could be justified in their actions. Again, at an abstract level, this makes sense. If you're putting others at risk, the government can place limits on your freedom, and if you're not vaccinated, you're more likely to be infectious. I can see that argument. But if you're being told, get vaccinated or stay locked down forever, that's your freedom, you will not get your freedom until you comply or get vaccinated, then the moral reasoning behind this is completely different. Vaccine passports might be the way forward, but if this leads to discrimination or abuse or even curtailment of our freedom, then we need to explore other options. Even if the government does not make it mandatory but leaves it to the businesses to decide, we could have the need to have a passport for a job, to go to the gym, attend events or even dine in a restaurant. This means that some people will be left behind, whether they're migrants or British nationals. We are effectively creating a two-tier system, and this can only spell unrest and disaster. We are dealing with a pandemic, but it's one thing to have a passport to travel, say, internationally, go on holidays. This is a privilege. But the right to participate in local community life is a fundamental right, and the imposition of a COVID passport could erode that. And finally, as expected, whilst researching on this subject, I found that there are fake COVID passports being sold on the internet. Like I said, there is a risk for abuse. The COVID passport raises a lot of legal challenges, such as creating a two-tier society, which could only make existing inequalities worse. But there's also other concerns, such as security concerns. Paper certificates are more accessible, but also easier to fake. What about apps? Well, they're vulnerable to fraud, as they've recently found out in Israel. And also there's privacy concerns. Who has access to the data? Who controls it? As a society, I believe we must start thinking about this. Carry out your research and maybe even consult with your lawyer or speak to me about your rights on this. And I believe that's important. So far, the government has not imposed the passport, but let us wait for the months to come to see how this will all unfold. Thank you for watching Kareesha Law.